Riverford, a small town in the heart of America, felt like a place where time had stood still. With a population of around 3,000, this town was known for its old houses, each holding the stories of several generations. On the main street, lined with ancient oaks and linden trees, stood St. Paul's Church, the heart of Riverford. Every Sunday, its heavy doors would swing open, inviting residents to gather for service and exchange news. For decades, Riverford remained a place where everyone knew each other, and each person was aware of their neighbor's past. The town lived in a rhythm disrupted only by minor incidents, like occasional car accidents or neighborly disputes. However, August 2007 brought an event that shook the townspeople to their core: the unexpected marriage of 55-year-old Evelyn Frost and 22-year-old Lucas Williams. Evelyn Frost was well known in Riverford. Reserved yet commanding respect, she owned a grand house on the outskirts of town, surrounded by a dense garden. Her first husband, George Frost, had died 5 years earlier under mysterious circumstances, leaving Evelyn a substantial fortune. After his death, she rarely appeared in public, preferring solitude. The people of Riverford gossiped about her wealth and possible involvement in her husband's death, but no one dared to ask her directly. Lucas Williams, on the other hand, was a newcomer to Riverford. Having moved there in early 2007, he quickly drew attention. Young, energetic, with ambitions that far exceeded his modest means, Lucas seemed the complete opposite of Evelyn. His sudden interest in the widow sparked a wave of discussions in town. No one could understand what connected these two people with such a significant age difference. Many believed their union wouldn't last long, and some even placed bets on when it would end. Amid these rumors and speculations, Evelyn and Lucas's wedding became a true sensation. The ceremony took place on August 12, 2007, at St. Paul's Church, where nearly the entire town gathered. An air of awkwardness hung over the crowd. Many had come just to witness this strange event firsthand. Evelyn in an elegant yet simple white dress, and Lucas, looking somewhat embarrassed, exchanged vows under the watchful eyes of dozens of skeptical onlookers. Just 2 days after the wedding, on August 14, 2007, Riverford's quiet was shattered by a shocking event. Lucas was found dead in the bedroom of the new home he shared with Evelyn. The circumstances of his death immediately appeared suspicious. Lucas was found dead on the bed, with clear signs of strangulation. His body also showed evidence of a struggle. Cuts and bruises on his hands and face indicated that he had fought desperately to defend himself from his attacker. Sheriff Mark Davis, a 48-year-old police veteran, arrived at the scene within minutes of the call. For him, this was not just another case. In the town where he had grown up and spent his entire life, such crimes were rare. He immediately realized that this murder would be the most challenging case of his career. His instincts told him that something more significant was hidden behind this tragic event than just a sudden outburst of violence. Davis began his investigation by questioning Evelyn Frost, who seemed shocked by what had happened. However, her calmness and composure only heightened the sheriff's suspicions. Why hadn't she woken up during the struggle? Why didn't she hear any screams? These questions lingered in the air, unanswered. Meanwhile, Lillian Gray, a childhood friend of Lucas, upon learning of his death, immediately sensed that something was amiss. She had known Lucas since childhood, and his sudden marriage to Evelyn had always seemed suspicious to her. Lillian decided to start her own investigation, relying on her intuition and memories of Lucas's past. Thus began a story that turned all of Riverford on its head. The town where everyone seemed to know each other turned out to be full of secrets and unspoken truths. The murder of Lucas Williams was just the beginning of a chain of events that would uncover long-buried secrets and forever change the town's life. Early one morning in the quiet town of Riverford, a disturbing phone call broke the silence. A frightened voice on the other end reported a horrifying discovery. Sheriff Mark Davis immediately rushed to the scene. As he entered the house, everything seemed calm, but this tranquility only masked the terrible event that had occurred. In the bedroom, on the bed, lay the body of 22-year-old Lucas Williams, Evelyn Frost's young and newlywed husband. Lucas was lying on his back, his face twisted in pain and terror. His neck bore clear signs of strangulation, deep, dark marks, likely left by a rope or cord. Lucas's hands were covered in abrasions and bruises, unmistakable evidence of his desperate struggle. Despite the obvious signs of a fight, there were no fingerprints or blood traces at the scene that could help identify the perpetrator. The room appeared almost sterile, making the case even more puzzling. Sheriff Davis carefully examined the crime scene, searching for even the smallest clue, but everything seemed too clean, too meticulously arranged. His suspicions began to grow that the killer knew exactly how to cover their tracks. When the sheriff found Evelyn, she was sitting in the kitchen, wrapped in a wool blanket. Her face was pale, but her eyes showed no sign of panic. She explained that she hadn't heard anything the night of the murder since she was sleeping in another room. Her words sounded logical, but there was a strange restraint in her demeanor. She seemed too calm, too composed for someone who had just lost her husband under such horrific circumstances. Davis asked her a few questions, trying to catch the slightest inconsistencies in her story, but Evelyn responded clearly and confidently. She claimed that Lucas had gone to bed before her, and she had fallen asleep in the guest room because she wasn't feeling well. She had heard nothing during the night and discovered him dead in the morning. But something about her reaction left the sheriff feeling uneasy. On one hand, Evelyn seemed sincere, but on the other, her cold composure struck him as unnatural. This alarmed him and made him suspect that she might be hiding something. Sheriff Davis, known for his sharp intuition, couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this case. His suspicions grew as he began questioning other Riverford residents about Lucas's last days. Several people mentioned that the young man had been acting strangely in the weeks leading up to his death. He had become nervous, uneasy, as if something or someone was bothering him. One neighbor recalled seeing him leaving the house late at night, a look of fear on his face. These accounts raised even more questions for the sheriff. What could have frightened Lucas so much? And was it connected to his sudden death? Davis realized that this mysterious wedding and the unexpected death of the young groom were just the tip of an iceberg, beneath which lay much darker secrets. After Lucas's death, his longtime childhood friend Lillian Gray couldn't find peace. Her intuition told her that there was more to this tragedy than just a simple accident. Lillian decided to conduct her own investigation, parallel to the official police efforts. She was deeply troubled by the thought that Lucas, whom she had known since childhood, could have found himself in such a terrible situation. As she began her investigation, Lillian uncovered a shocking truth. Lucas had been facing serious financial troubles. His ambitions always exceeded his means, and he repeatedly took out loans he couldn't repay. His debts piled up, and so did his desperation. Soon Lillian found evidence that Lucas might have seen his marriage to Evelyn as a way to solve his financial problems. Close friends of Lucas, whom Lillian interviewed, recalled him mentioning the potential benefits of marrying a woman with considerable wealth. Despite all of this, Lillian refused to believe that her friend could have made such a calculated decision. She was convinced that there was more to this marriage than just money. Perhaps Lucas had been cornered, but what or who drove him to that point remained unknown. While Lillian delved into Lucas's affairs, Sheriff Mark Davis dug deeper into Evelyn Frost's past. The more he learned about her, the more questions arose. It turned out that Evelyn's first husband, a wealthy businessman, had died many years ago under mysterious circumstances. He drowned during an evening yacht trip, despite being an excellent swimmer. This incident was ruled an accident at the time, but now with his widow at the center of a new scandal, new doubts were emerging. Conversations with Evelyn's former acquaintances only added fuel to the fire. Some recalled that after her husband's death, Evelyn unexpectedly cut ties with his family and friends, isolating herself from the world. Moreover, the fortune she inherited seemed suspiciously large, especially considering that her husband had not left a will. Rumors that Evelyn might have been involved in her first husband's death began to resurface. These whispers spread throughout the town, and soon no one believed in coincidence anymore. Evelyn found herself at the center of public scrutiny, but she remained stubbornly silent, which only deepened the suspicions. In the midst of her investigation, Lillian stumbled upon an old photograph, accidentally found among Lucas's personal belongings. It showed Lucas with a woman much older than him. Lillian didn't know who this woman was, but she noticed how closely and warmly they were holding hands, clearly indicating a close relationship. Upon closer inspection, Lillian realized that the photo was taken a few months before Lucas's wedding to Evelyn. This discovery was a shock to Lillian. She began to suspect that Lucas might have had a secret relationship with this woman and that it might have influenced his decision to marry Evelyn. The questions only multiplied. Who was this mysterious woman? And could she have been the reason for Lucas's demise? Lillian decided to uncover the truth, even if it meant revealing the darkest secrets of her friend's past. Sheriff Mark Davis and Lillian Gray began to work closely together, combining their efforts in the investigation. Their joint efforts led to the discovery of shocking facts. It turned out that Evelyn Frost not only knew about Lucas's financial problems, but also actively used this information to her advantage. Soon they found recordings of phone conversations in which Lucas and Evelyn had heated arguments about money. In one of these conversations, Lucas threatened to leave if Evelyn didn't stop her manipulations. These recordings became key evidence, pointing to a serious conflict between the spouses just before the murder. Knowing that Lucas might leave her, Evelyn began to act increasingly erratically. Witnesses recalled seeing her in the days leading up to the murder, distracted and nervous. Further analysis of financial documents revealed that Lucas had not only failed to resolve his debt issues, but had also sunk deeper into trouble, as Evelyn kept him in a tight financial grip. An elderly neighbor, Mrs. Harper, who lived across the street from Evelyn's house, recalled an important detail from that night. She had returned home late and noticed a car pulling up to Evelyn's house, from which an unfamiliar man emerged. He confidently approached the door as if he knew exactly where he was going. This struck her as suspicious, but she didn't think much of it until she heard about Lucas's death. When Mrs. Harper shared this with the sheriff, he realized that a third person might be involved in the case. He reached out to a detective to find out who this man was and what he was doing that night. With each new piece of information, the sheriff became more convinced that Lucas's death had been a premeditated act, not just a random act of violence. The investigation took an unexpected turn when Sheriff Davis discovered that the man was a private investigator hired by Evelyn herself. Her motives grew even murkier, but one thing became clear. Evelyn suspected Lucas of infidelity and had hired the detective to keep an eye on him. This revelation changed everything. The sheriff realized that Evelyn might have planned Lucas's murder from the start, using his weaknesses and alleged infidelities as justification for her cruel plan. More importantly, the sheriff understood that the detective might have played a crucial role in the events of that night. Perhaps he wasn't just observing Lucas, but was directly involved in carrying out Evelyn's plans. This new version of events made Davis accelerate the investigation, as there was a growing threat that the detective might disappear before they could question him. Sheriff and Lillian knew they were running out of time. They had to act quickly and decisively to uncover all the details of this complex and dark story before it was too late. Sheriff Mark Davis and Lillian Gray decided to have a final meeting with Evelyn Frost, aiming to uncover new details and possibly pressure her into revealing the truth. They chose a place that seemed neutral and wouldn't arouse Evelyn's suspicions. A small office in the local police station, dimly lit. The atmosphere in the room was tense. Davis began the questioning with simple inquiries, gradually leading Evelyn to discuss her relationship with Lucas. Evelyn, initially calm and confident, began to show signs of unease when the conversation turned to Lucas's last days. Unexpectedly, under the pressure of questions, she made a shocking confession. Evelyn admitted that she knew Lucas was planning to deceive her, possibly for her fortune. On the night of the murder, she had slipped poison into his drink to prevent this. Evelyn claimed she acted to protect herself and her assets from betrayal, but she hadn't expected it to end in Lucas's death. However, the autopsy conducted after Lucas's body was found contradicted her confession. The medical examiner's report clearly stated that no traces of poison were found in Lucas's system. The real cause of death was strangulation, with the marks on his neck indicating that it had been done by hand, with clear signs of a struggle. This revelation shocked Davis and Lillian, as it cast doubt on Evelyn's version of events. The sheriff begins to suspect that Evelyn may have been just a pawn in a much more complex game. Someone aware of her conflict with Lucas and her intention to poison him might have exploited the situation to kill Lucas and frame Evelyn. This theory prompts Davis to revisit the evidence he had gathered and reconsider details that may have been overlooked. Soon, a final, crucial piece of evidence emerges, turning all previous assumptions upside down. Davis receives the fingerprint analysis results from the murder weapon, a cord used to strangle Lucas. To his horror, the fingerprints belonged to Lillian Gray. Lillian, who had been on the sheriff's side throughout the investigation, now becomes the prime suspect. Davis begins to realize that her motives might go deeper than just wanting to help solve the case. New details from her past surface. It turns out that Lillian had long harbored feelings for Lucas and was consumed by jealousy when she learned of his marriage to Evelyn. Moreover, their friendship, which appeared strong, was actually strained, and Lillian might have feared losing her close friend forever. The sheriff suspects that Lillian may not have acted alone. He begins to consider that someone else might have been involved, perhaps feeding her information or helping her cover up the evidence. But the central question remains, was Lillian the true killer, or was she coerced into committing the crime? This unexpected twist throws the investigation into an even more tangled web, where no theory seems entirely plausible. Davis understands that despite Evelyn's confession and the new evidence against Lillian, the true story might be far darker and more complex than he initially imagined. Sheriff Mark Davis realizes that the key to solving the case lies in the connections between Lillian Gray and Evelyn Frost. He intensifies his interrogations, digging into both women's pasts. During the investigation, it is revealed that Lillian and Evelyn actually knew each other much longer than they had claimed. Their relationship was complicated and tense, with each harboring hidden motives. It comes to light that Lillian and Lucas were once more than just friends. Lillian had romantic feelings for him, but they were never reciprocated. She was deeply jealous when Lucas began showing interest in Evelyn. This jealousy became the driving force behind her actions when she learned of the wedding. But the real shock comes when the sheriff discovers that Evelyn, knowing about Lillian's feelings, manipulated her, using her as a tool to get rid of Lucas. Evelyn deliberately spoke of his alleged infidelity and claimed she suspected him of betrayal, pushing Lillian towards helping her eliminate the dangerous young husband. On the night of the murder, Evelyn did indeed attempt to poison Lucas, but the poison didn't act as quickly as she expected. Lucas began to struggle to breathe but didn't die, which threw Evelyn into a panic. At that moment, Lillian arrived at the house, having been summoned by Evelyn under the pretext of a final conversation. Seeing Lucas still alive and fighting for his life, Lillian, in a fit of fear and jealousy, decided to strangle him. Evelyn watched but did nothing to stop Lillian, believing that this way she could get rid of Lucas without dirtying her own hands. She had planned to use Lillian as a scapegoat if anything went wrong. However, after the murder, she realized that things were spiraling out of control when the investigators started finding evidence pointing to her involvement. Sheriff Davis, recognizing the scale of the conspiracy, decides to play his final card. He arranges a confrontation between Lillian and Evelyn, staging a meeting in his office under the pretense of closing the case. During the conversation, Lillian and Evelyn begin accusing each other of the murder, each trying to save themselves at the other's expense. The sheriff skillfully steers their dialogue, forcing both women to reveal more than they intended. Eventually, Evelyn admits that she did manipulate Lillian, but Lillian counters by saying that she couldn't resist her feelings and ultimately killed Lucas in a fit of passion, believing it was the only way to save him from Evelyn. Evelyn Frost is arrested for orchestrating the murder and manipulating Lillian, exploiting her vulnerabilities for her own selfish ends. Lillian Gray is found guilty of murdering Lucas Williams, but considering her psychological state and the fact that she was a victim of manipulation, her sentence is reduced. She is sent to a psychiatric facility for mandatory treatment. Sheriff Mark Davis closes the case, but he understands that this story has left an indelible mark on the town of Riverford. It has revealed that beneath the surface of calm and comfort, the darkest human motives can lurk. The townspeople will long remember the tragedy that changed their lives, and the sheriff realizes that evil can hide in the most unexpected places.